Welcome everyone. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. I'm here with Aoife. Aoife is going to talk about gut health and what can we do to improve our gut health. This is a very popular topic, but at the same time, there's a lot of confusion. So hopefully Aoife will help us today to understand what can we do to improve our gut health and what foods should we eat and what other things can we implement. So I'll hand it over to you, Aoife.
Great, thank you so much, Nara, for the introduction, and hello to everyone who's watching online. So as Nara mentioned, I'm going to be talking all about gut health today, so very topical. So I'm going to run through the presentation. It's around 30 minutes or so. So if you do have any questions during the webinar, feel free to type them in the chat, and I'll come round to them at the end. We can answer some questions at the end. So just to give you a bit of background on myself before we get started. So as I said, my name is Aoife MacDonald. I'm a specialist gut health dietitian. I'm based in Cork. So I'm a founder of an online gut health clinic called the Digestive Health Clinic. And I also do a lot of workplace well-being in terms of nutrition for gut health, as well as other topics. And I run an online specialist gut health clinic. So that's a little bit about me. I studied nutrition at UCC originally, and then I studied dietetics in the UK for a couple of years. Worked in the NHS for 3 years and came back to Ireland about 3.5 years ago. So I've been back in Cork since then. So welcome again to the presentation. So the title of this presentation is Gut Health, What You Need to Know. So I know there can be a lot of conflicting information out there around gut health. What should we be doing? What should we not be doing? So hopefully during the presentation today, I can clear up maybe some questions you have around that. And as I said, feel free to type any questions in the chat box during the webinar, and I can go through them at the end to answer any questions that you might have. So just to give you an overview of the topics that we're going to discuss. So there's a lot to kind of cram into the 30 or 40 minutes. I'm going to touch on a range of different things to hopefully give you kind of a broad understanding of gut health and what that means. So we're going to start off with the basics of what is the gut, what is good gut health. That's important that we know the background on the gut. Then we'll talk about what's normal in terms of bowel movements and stuff like that, which I know isn't the nicest topic for a lunch and learn, but we can't talk about gut health without talking about the bowels, of course. We'll talk about kind of red flags to look out for. I'll briefly touch on IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome. So this is something that I work a lot of people one-to-one. So I'll briefly touch on that and what that kind of looks like. We'll talk about the microbiome, the gut-brain axis, of course, fibre, probiotics and prebiotics. So lots to cover. And at the end, then I'll answer any questions that you might have. So I thought we'd start off with the digestive system. So I always cover this at the start of any gut health talk, just so we're all on the same page in terms of the gut, what we're referring to, and the different functions of the different parts of your gut. So first of all, the gut is around 9 meters long. So from the mouth to the other end is around 9 meters. So very, very long. So obviously your intestines are kind of twisted up in your abdomen, and that's how we can fit that kind of 9 meters of the gut in there. So in terms of digestion and how that works, digestion is going to start in the mouth. So chewing, so as we're chewing, there's going to be mechanical breakdown of our food. And then of course, as we're chewing as well, we're going to have enzymes released, which help to break down our food as well in our mouth. So digestion is going to start in the mouth. The food then is going to travel then from your mouth down your esophagus, which is like a muscular tube that connects your mouth to your stomach. The food will travel down there into your stomach. And in the stomach then, of course, you have, again, kind of digestive juices or acids and things like that. The stomach is very muscular, so it's really going to kind of churn the food around, punch it around the place to turn it into a liquid, basically, before it's allowed then to pass through into your small intestine, which is, it's longer than your large intestine, but it's narrower. So that's why it's called small intestine. So the majority of our nutrients from our food are actually absorbed in the small intestine. And then from there, the leftover food, whatever's left, is going to go into your large intestine. The main role of your large intestine is to reabsorb salt and water from your gut to form a stool. And of course, as well, the large intestine is home to your gut bacteria, your gut microbiome, which we'll talk about later. So it has, a lot of important functions besides kind of preparing waste for excretion. So as well, so obviously you have that anatomy of your digestive system, but there's also a number of organs that are linked to your digestive system that are essential to allow you to digest your food. So these are the liver, the pancreas, and the gallbladder. So all of these are involved in digestion, and they all need to be working properly in order for you to be digesting your food properly. So you have the liver. So the liver's role in kind of absorbing nutrients, digesting your food, is around bile production. So your liver will produce bile that will go into your small intestine and allows you to break down the fat that you've eaten. Your pancreas then, so that's involved in producing digestive enzymes to help break down your proteins, your fats, your carbohydrates. Another role of the pancreas is to do with insulin production. So it'll also make insulin to help you to absorb your carbohydrates. And then the last organ there, small organ in real life, but it's called the gallbladder. So you might have heard of this, but this is kind of linked with your liver. So any kind of extra bile that is produced, your body will store that in your liver. And then when you eat a high fat meal, your body will release a large amount of bile into your small intestine to allow you to digest that large meal. So the gallbladder, like a lot of people can end up having this removed. It's called a cholecystectomy, is that when that is removed, and that is quite common. So some people who may have had their gallbladder removed may have to be careful with their fat intake. They may find that large fat intakes cause digestive symptoms. Some people tend to be okay and their liver can kind of cope with producing extra bile. But yeah, a lot of people can have the gallbladder removed, but we can function without it. So now that we've covered what the gut, what it is, kind of important organs there as well. So we want to talk about what actually is gut health. So good gut health is difficult to define. There's no kind of agreed definition for it or for what it kind of looks like. But generally, there's kind of three criteria that we want to look at to determine whether your gut is healthy or not. So the first thing is the absence of GI, which is gastrointestinal disease or symptoms. So some kind of GI diseases might be celiac disease, which is quite common. That affects about 1% of the population, but it is severely underdiagnosed. Or IBD, which is inflammatory bowel disease, which can include things like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. But there are some kind of diseases that can affect, of course, digestion and absorption of nutrients. The second thing then that's involved with having a good gut health is around your gut microbiota or your gut bacteria. So we know that like the gut bacteria is quite a new area. I know it's kind of something that's become very mainstream over the past couple of years as the research has evolved, but there's still a lot that we don't know about it. So in terms of the gut bacteria, we're born with it or developed when we're kids. It's usually fully developed by the time we're kind of 2 or 3 years old. But throughout our adult life, it can be altered through various different factors. But like in terms of your gut bacteria, a healthy microbiota is one that's quite diverse. So the more kind of variety you have of different microbiota in your gut, generally the better it's kind of considered to be. So there are lots of, I guess, commercial tests that you can get out there that look at your stool that will tell you the types of bacteria that you might have in your gut. At the moment, they're kind of mainly useful for like a research setting. At the moment, for the general person, like we'll give you a general idea of what bacteria might be in your gut, but in terms of what we can actually do with that information at this time, it is quite limited. Because we don't know enough about it. We know different bacteria can do different things in different people and stuff like that. So when I'm working one-to-one with clients, I'm not going to change my plan really based on something from, a test like that. It doesn't really give us information around what foods we should be eating, although some of them can claim that. So it's definitely an area to look out for. I think maybe in the future, kind of around personalized nutrition, it might come into play. But at this point in time, we just don't know enough to give kind of personal recommendations based on your gut bacteria at the moment. And the final thing then is number 3, so effective digestion and absorption of nutrients from your food. So of course, in order to get the good from the food that we're eating, we need to be able to digest those foods well and absorb the nutrients from them. So your ability to do that might be impaired if you do have some type of GI condition. Like we said, like if it's undiagnosed celiac, for example, that can cause inflammation in your small intestines, so you may not absorb your nutrients properly. So in someone with celiac, they might present with like anemia or something like that, where their body hasn't been able to absorb their iron So that can be, a sign of undiagnosed celiac disease. But once someone is then compliant with the gluten-free diet, then they should be fine in terms of digesting their nutrients. So yeah, the gut needs to be working properly, of course, in order for us to get the nutrients from it. So I was debating taking out this slide, but as I said at the start, we do need to talk about the consistency of bowel movements and what actually is normal and what we should be kind of looking out for. So in terms of what is normal, I know sometimes we don't really know because it's not something we maybe talk to our friends about or our family about, but oftentimes in clinic when someone might come in and they might be having a certain symptoms or certain type of stool their whole life, and they just thought that was normal because they didn't know any different or they'd not spoken to anyone about it. So in terms of what is normal, generally in terms of frequency, it's when you're opening your bowels between 3 times per day and 3 times per week. So that's the kind of range. So again, it can be different for everyone. Some people might go once a day, some people might go twice a day, someone else might go once every second day or something like that. So whatever's kind of normal for you. The only thing to look out for really is if, like, for example, you generally go every day and then suddenly you're only going once a day or suddenly you're going 5 times a day. That kind of change from your normal is something to kind of get investigated. So some of the kind of red flags we'd say in terms of gut health, so things to kind of watch out for. So if there's a change in your stool frequency or consistency, and that's associated with something like unplanned weight loss, if there's blood in your stool, if you have a very sudden change in bowel habit, age 55 in particular, but I'd say kind of any age really, it is worth kind of seeing your doctor just to investigate that and make sure there's nothing going on there. And this kind of diagram on the right, I'd use this kind of every day in clinic, speaking to people to kind of classify the consistency of the bowel movement they might be having. So kind of 1 and 2 up here, they're considered to be constipated stool. So they might signify a lack of fluid or like a lack of fibre. And then down the other end, type 5, 6, and 7, they're considered kind of loose or kind of diarrhea. And then the kind of ideal consistency we should be aiming for is type 3 and 4. So that's kind of considered normal. And that's the type we should be having most of the time. You might have the odd loose stool or the odd constipated stool, but overall, the majority should be in this group, kind of type 3 to type 4. So I thought I'd just briefly do a slide on IBS. So there may be some people watching this or watching the replay that have IBS or know someone with IBS. It's likely that everyone knows someone because IBS is very common. So it affects up to 20% of the population. The estimates are kind of between 5 and 20%. It tends to be more common in women than in men. There's no cure for IBS, but it can be managed in lots of different ways, in terms of diet or medications, psychological input and things like that. So there's lots of ways it can be managed, but it can't be cured. So IBS itself is what we call a functional gut disorder. So some people with IBS may have gotten like a camera into their bowel to have a look at it. Everything might look completely healthy, completely normal, and they can't find anything on the camera. So it's to do with the function. So physically it looks fine and everything, but it's not functioning correctly. Some of the kind of common symptoms of IBS could be diarrhea for some people, or constipation, or even a mix of both. Could be excessive wind production, severe bloating, tummy pain. But again, these symptoms can kind of be replicated in other gut conditions as well. So that's why it's important, if you think you have IBS and you haven't been to your GP about it and had a blood test to rule out celiac, or to rule out things like inflammatory bowel disease, it's really important to do that so that you're on the right management depending on what condition it is. So yeah, so IBS is very common, but it can be managed very successfully. But just always to get yourself checked if you do have any of these types of symptoms. So then the gut microbiota. So this again is a massive area. So the gut microbiota refers to the trillions of microbes that live in your gut. So microbes, it's not just bacteria, they include things like fungi and viruses as well. So microbes they're present all over the body and all over surfaces, they're everywhere basically. But in humans, the majority of the bacteria are concentrated in the gut, and this is often referred to as the gut microbiota or the gut microbiome. So the terms microbiome and microbiota, they're often used interchangeably, but they do mean different things. So the microbiota refers to the bacteria, fungi, viruses, etc., themselves, whereas a microbiome refers to those microbes plus their genetic material. So we do have more bacterial genes than human genes. So, it's thought that the microbiota or the microbiome may impact our risk of developing diseases and things like that. We know that even like in identical twins, they have the same DNA as human DNA, they look the same and everything, but they only have about 40% of the same microbes. So that sometimes may explain why one twin might develop a condition and the other one might not. It might be related to gut bacteria, which is really interesting. And there's more than 1,000 different types of bacteria in the gut. So that just shows like how much there is to learn basically about all these individual species, what they do. If they're sometimes, a certain bacteria might do one job in someone and another job in someone else. So it's very kind of hard to know exactly what to advise at the moment in terms of diet and someone's gut bacteria. And that's the reason why there's just so many different types and lots more kind of being discovered as well. So it is a really interesting area. And they do a lot of research in UCC in the APC Microbiome Institute. They produce really good research papers and stuff like that. So they're definitely worth looking at. But the whole area of the microbiome is quickly evolving, but there's still a lot that we're learning about. So again, the gut-brain axis. So you've probably heard of the gut-brain axis. We know in IBS that the communication between the gut and the brain can be disrupted. So what the gut-brain axis actually is it refers to the constant two-way communication that takes place between the gut and the brain. So we know that the gut and the brain are always talking to each other. And there's also kind of a new term called the gut-brain microbiota axis. So that includes the gut, the brain, and your gut bacteria all involved in communicating with each other constantly. So the gut is often referred to as the second brain, which many of you may have heard that term before. And you may have noticed as well that a lot of the time what's going on in our mind can affect our gut. So for example, if we're feeling anxious, some people can notice that that might upset their bowels or stuff like that, or stress might upset it. Getting butterflies in your tummy if you're nervous, like going into an exam or excited and stuff like that. So your gut and your brain kind of keep in touch and they know what's going on in the other one. So when it comes to stress, so people's guts can be affected differently by stress. So some people I'd work with, their gut might completely seize, like they might get very, very constipated when they're stressed, that their gut just kind of stops moving things through. It affects their motility in that way. And for others, the stress might cause them to have loose stools because their gut just wants to get rid of everything. It can worsen things like wind and bloating, because if the movement or the motility of the gut is affected, things like gas might not be able to move through as easily. You might get trapped wind and bloating and stuff like that. So it can have the opposite effects on the gut depending on the individual. As well, in terms of stress and how that affects the gut. So basically when we're feeling stressed, our gut function is downregulated and the blood flow to your gut is reduced. So when we're stressed, your body is kind of in that fight or flight mode and your stress hormones are increased, your heart rate is increased, the breathing rate is increased, and what your body will do is take the blood away from your gut and divert it to like your brain, your heart, your lungs, etc., which are kind of considered essential when your body thinks you're in danger. And that of course is going to have an impact on gut function. So like for eating when we're very stressed, our gut, it's not going to be able to digest your food optimally because it's not going to have enough blood flow. It's not going to be able to move the muscles as efficiently, and that can of course affect movement of things through your gut and digestion and absorption of nutrients. So when we're eating, we kind of want to be in the opposite of the fight or flight. We want to be in rest and digest. So when we're in rest and digest, it's the opposite. So your body kind of relaxes, your blood flow will divert itself back to your digestive system, and it will allow your gut to function more optimally. So the way you can kind of help to relax yourself is, take deep breaths going into a meal. Even 2 to 3 kind of deep kind of belly breaths is really beneficial for helping to kind of just calm your body as you're sitting down for a meal, to relax you and to allow your body to know like it's safe, it can prioritize digestion. So I talk a lot to my clients about that, particularly people who have noted that, stress definitely impacts their symptoms. And for most people I speak to, stress is, a big trigger for their gut symptoms. So that's something to be aware of. It's generally due to stress. So if you are having digestive issues, that can be something that's really easy to implement, is kind of deep breathing, doing regular, even yoga or regular meditation, mindfulness, all that kind of thing really helps to improve that communication between the gut and the brain. So that's really important for someone with or without kind of gut issues. So then in terms of diet and what to do to help to optimize your gut health. So this slide is all around fiber. So generally kind of a gut healthy diet is one that is high in fiber and things like prebiotics, which we'll talk about in a minute. So what actually is fiber? So fiber is part of the cellular structure of all our plant-based foods. So our plant-based foods include 6 different groups. So they're listed there. So you have fruit, you have vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grain cereals, and pulses. So whole grain cereals would be things like, even if you could include even a high fiber breakfast cereal like Weetabix, could be oats, it could be like quinoa, brown rice, brown bread, all that kind of thing. Or pulses, which are things like chickpeas, beans, lentils, all those types of foods. So in Ireland and the UK, so the average fiber intake is around 19 grams, and we should be aiming for roughly 30 grams per day. So about 80% of the Irish population don't eat enough fiber. So 80% of people, on the call today on average probably aren't eating enough fiber. So there's some tips now in the next slide on how to do that, but it just shows that, the majority of us could look at increasing your fiber. And the best way to do it is to look at these 6 different groups, because a lot of people might say, oh yeah, like I eat plenty of fiber, like I love my fruit and veg, I eat lots of fruit and vegetables every day. So on average, like a portion of fruit or a portion of veg would have about 2 grams of fiber on average. Some will have more, some will have less, but on average, if someone's eating 5 portions a day of fruit and vegetables, they might get maybe 10 grams of fiber from that. So if they're not eating food, from these other 4 plant-based food groups, it can be very difficult for them to reach their fiber needs. So think about your diet and think about these 6 groups. Like, is there any groups there that you never eat? And even if you are eating all these different groups, like how often are you having them? Is it every week or only occasionally? Within the groups, for example, within your fruit, your veg, your grains, like, are you eating the same types all the time, like the same 2 or 3 fruit every week, the same veg, or are you having like a good variety? So as well as aiming for like the 30 grams of fiber every day, we should be aiming to have 30 different types of foods per week from this group, those 6 groups here. So it's about kind of reaching that fiber first, and then after that looking at, okay, like how diverse is my diet? Your gut bacteria feed off a lot of these fibers, and different bacteria like different foods. So the more variety we can give them, the better, and the more of a kind of balanced gut microbiota we're going to have. So in terms of kind of practical tips that you can use to increase your fiber intake. So the first one, very simple in terms of fruit and veg. So think about your current breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. Is every meal or snack that you're having at the moment including some type of fruit or some type of vegetable? Or is there 1 or 2 there that don't contain them regularly or consistently? If you're not having fruit or veg with every meal, that's a really easy place to start. So start by having them every meal or snack. Swapping to higher fiber grains. So instead of going for like white bread or like a low fiber cereal, for example. So some very common breakfasts people might have might be like your Rice Krispies, your cornflakes. So we know that they're very low in fiber. So like a bowl of cornflakes or Rice Krispies would have less than 1 gram of fiber in the bowl. So like if your breakfast has less than 1 gram of fiber and you're aiming for 30 grams of fiber in the day, it's going to be very difficult for you to get that 30 grams of fiber if your breakfast is really lacking. And as you'll see on the next slide, breakfast is a really easy and kind of convenient time that we can up our fiber intake. So swap into a high fiber cereal, for example. So like I said, Weetabix, porridge oats, like fruit and fiber, like muesli and stuff like that tend to be higher in fiber. So have a look at that. So seeds and stuff like that. So if seeds is a group that you don't eat very regularly, get like a little pouch or a container of your mixed seeds, sprinkle them onto whatever meal you're having. It might be into soup to add a bit of crunch, your salads, in your cereal in the morning, into your yogurt if you're having a snack. That's an easy way to add fiber to those meals and snacks. Having nuts every day. So we know nuts have lots of benefits in terms of their fiber content. They have a bit of protein, they have healthy fats, and they have some prebiotic fibers, a lot of them. So including them as part of your snack even in the day is really, really useful and an easy way to kind of tick that box in terms of getting the nuts in out of that 6 plant-based food groups that we talked about. So also thinking about your protein sources throughout the day. So like, are all your dinners based on meat or fish, or like, do you ever have any plant-based dinners? So kind of making that swap, once or twice a week, taking out your meat, your chicken, your fish, and going for something like lentils, chickpeas, beans, or even reducing the meat content of your meal and, putting in a tin of chickpeas or a tin of kidney beans into your dinner, into your bolognese, into your chili, into your chicken curry and stuff like that is a really good way of increasing your fiber content very easily. And I guess the cautionary thing with fiber is if you're increasing your fiber, it's really important that you increase your fluid as well. So a lot of people might think, oh, I'm going to eat more fiber now, but they might have a poor fluid intake. So ideally, if you're planning to increase your fiber intake and you think your fluid is suboptimal, then look at increasing your fluid intake first, and then increasing your fiber after that. So you'd see, if you've ever had chia seeds or like porridge oats, when you put them into fluid like water, you cook them, they absorb all the water and they become like a gel. So think of that happening in your intestine. If you're going to put in a load of fiber and that fiber is going to try and absorb water and there's not enough fluid there in your gut, then of course it's going to be very dry. It's not really going to move through your gut very easily, and it might actually worsen constipation for many people as well. So you want to make sure that your fluid intake is adequate before increasing your fiber. And then as well, the last point there, remember to increase your fiber intake slowly. So fiber, on the next slide, it will show you kind of the fiber content of different foods, because I know it can be really confusing if you're told to eat more fiber, but then you're like, I don't know how much fiber is in a food. So that's difficult to do. So it's important to increase it slowly. So we normally say like increase by maybe 5 grams per week. So you might add an extra 5 grams of fiber one week, see how you get on with it. The next week, add in another 5 grams of fiber until you're kind of hitting your kind of goal there in terms of your fiber. You're hitting that 30 grams. Some people might have a lower or higher tolerance level, so just see how you get on. But again, if you kind of introduce fiber and you're a bit uncomfortable, like keep it at the same level for another week, make sure you're drinking enough. And then once your gut is kind of happy with the fiber content that you're eating, then you can, increase it again after that. So just do it slowly, and plenty of fluid is really important. So then in terms of some infographics I did on Instagram a while back. So this is just to demonstrate like the different fiber content of different foods, to kind of give you kind of visuals on how you can actually increase your fiber. So you have chickpeas, for example. So a third of a can of chickpeas has about 5 grams of fiber. So it could be that you're having a chicken curry or something, you take out one of the chicken breasts, you add in, some chickpeas instead. That can be useful. So something like chia seeds, adding that into like even soup or porridge, cereal, yogurt, anything like that will give you 5 grams of fiber. A portion of raspberries, which is 80 grams, will give you 5 grams. And then a high fiber breakfast cereal like fruit and fiber or something like that will give you 5 grams as well. So the next one here is just to demonstrate how you can boost your fiber intake at breakfast. So like we said earlier, your typical breakfast cereal like Rice Krispies cornflakes might have like less than a gram of fiber. So the first step might be, okay, I'm going to swap that to a high fiber cereal like your Weetabix. And then once your gut's kind of happy with that, you might like, okay, I'm going to increase my fiber more. So I'm going to add in some chia seeds maybe for a week. Then after that, you might add in a piece of fruit. So you started with, 4 gram fiber breakfast. Now your breakfast is up to 12 grams of fiber. So if you're aiming to get that 30 grams a day, you're more than a third of the way there, by breakfast, which is going to put you on the right track to having enough fiber throughout the day. And then finally, some kind of 5 gram fiber snack. So combining like an apple with something like almonds can be a good snack and give you about 5 grams of fiber. Combining your yogurt with like strawberries and mixed seeds, that will give you about 5 grams of fiber. So they're like some kind of handy snacks you could bring into work, or having them at home, wherever you're working. And they can be handy as a way to just up your fiber intake quite easily. So that's just give you a visual of how much fiber is in different things. So then in terms of prebiotics and probiotics, so these terms some of you may be familiar with already. So the two terms are very different things. So prebiotics basically are the food for the friendly microbes in your gut, so the ones we talked about earlier. So they will eat the prebiotics. And when your gut bacteria eat them, they basically ferment them. they produce like things like short chain fatty acids and things like that, which can have anti-inflammatory effects and other health benefits. So that's where the benefits of the prebiotics come from. It's feeding those bacteria, and then the things that they produce from them are beneficial. And we'll talk more on the next slide about sources of prebiotics. Probiotics then are actually the live microorganisms. So that's the scientific definition, but they're basically just the live bacteria. So the prebiotics are the food for bacteria, and the probiotics are the bacteria themselves. So to give you an idea of what some prebiotics actually are, so there's loads of different types, but this is just a list of a couple of different ones, and like a lot of them are quite common foods that we might eat quite regularly. So things like artichoke, maybe not as common, but things like garlic, onion, like cashew nuts, asparagus, lentils, apples. So they're a small selection of different kind of prebiotic foods that you might eat. So, you know, if you want to improve your gut health, like we said, increasing the amount of plant-based foods in your diet, increasing the fiber, including these kind of prebiotic foods that will feed your gut bacteria. And like I said, diversity is key. So the more different types of foods you're having, the better for your gut health, because it's going to feed a wider range of the bacteria living in your gut, and it's going to provide you with a nice balanced and a nice kind of diverse range of bacteria in your gut. So that's kind of the top tip, really, is diversity with the different plant foods in your diet if you're looking to support your gut health. So we're nearly at the end, so I'm just about keeping to time. So in terms of probiotics, so like we said, they are the live bacteria. So where can we get these from in our diet? So probiotics are found in many foods. They're like, in terms of the foods that they're found in, some are less common, but they're becoming more common. But things like live yogurts, so yogurts anyway are fermented, but then when they're processed afterward to remove kind of the harmful bacteria, that, you know, will kill off the good bacteria as well. So a lot of companies now, and definitely a lot more in recent years, are actually like adding in live bacteria after. So they contain live bacteria when we buy them in the supermarket. So, you know, any yogurt really, if you just see if it says like live cultures or live yogurt, that's telling you that they've added in additional live bacteria, you know, after production. So they're good to have for supporting your gut health. So other types of fermented things might be like kefir. So this diagram or this little jug over here is showing someone making kefir. So if any of you ever made it, so you have these little grains called kefir grains, and you put them into your milk and leave them, and they ferment it basically. And it's quite sour, like it does take a bit of time to get used to. You can buy it commercially as well, but it is kind of cost effective and easy to make at home. You can make like water kefir and stuff like that as well. It doesn't always have to be milk. And then other things like fermented cabbages, so things like sauerkraut and kimchi, which are kind of less common. And people would always ask about probiotic supplements. So supplements, you've probably all come across them, like in pharmacies or health shops and stuff like that. At the moment, like, they can be helpful in certain situations. So in some people with IBS, they can be helpful for certain symptoms. If someone's on antibiotics, they can be helpful to kind of, I guess, minimize the damage to the good bacteria. But in terms of just a healthy person taking them, at the moment, there's not strong enough research to suggest that we should all be taking them. Because we know, like, we do have our own bacteria already that we've developed since birth. So the best thing is probably to look after the ones you have. So upping your prebiotic foods, upping your fiber, your fluid, looking at other elements of your lifestyle, like your sleep, your exercise, stress management. All those things are going to have an impact on your gut health as well. So always look at those things first. But if you are thinking about probiotic, just get, you know, individualized advice on that, because some products have studies in them for certain things, others don't have any research in them. So just making sure you're not kind of wasting your money on ones that aren't going to give you the effect that you want. So just a summary, so I know we covered quite a lot there in the half an hour, but hopefully it gave you a good overview of gut health, what it means, how to look after it, how to, you know, optimize your diet to manage it as well. So just some of the takeaway points from the presentation. So like we said, the most important thing really for looking after your gut is having a diverse diet with plenty of fiber, if possible, gradually increasing your fiber intake and making sure your fluid intake is adequate as well. Deep breathing after and before your meals. So again, that's going to work on that gut-brain axis. It's going to help you to relax your body, get the blood flow going back to your gut, so your gut can properly move and digest your food and break it down and everything like that. Managing stress, so that's to do with the gut-brain axis. Like I said as well, stress can impact the gut in negative ways for many people. So if you're having if you notice that your symptoms are worse around stress, then really focusing on that gut-brain axis, like we said, your meditation, deep breathing, yoga, and stuff like that has been shown to be really beneficial. So being active and spending time outdoors. So particularly like being outdoors, that can expose your body to different microbes in the environment that can support gut health. There's research in like dogs, so even children who grew up with dogs might have a more diverse gut bacteria as well, which is interesting. So of course, getting adequate sleep is going to be important for everything really, but it is important, of course, for your gut health as well. Staying well hydrated, like we said. If you're increasing your fibre intake, making sure you increase your fluid first or alongside it to prevent any kind of negative side effects from increasing your fibre. And then consuming prebiotics and probiotic foods. So some of the ones we talked about earlier, so those kind of fermentable foods that will feed your gut bacteria are really important. And then probiotic foods like your live yogurt and stuff like that, or sauerkraut, kefir, if you want to try and make it. They're all going to support your gut health as well. So hopefully that gave you a good overview of gut health and what it involves. So if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat. I think I see a few there already. And thanks so much for listening. So I'll just give my details there of my website, email, and I'm on Instagram as well at aoifemacdonald.dietitian if you're interested in learning more about gut health. So thanks so much, and I'll stop sharing the screen and I'll have a look at the questions there. Sorry, I know the sun is kind of shining on my face there, blinding me. So let me just have a look. Someone has asked, is it possible, does it help if eaten as raw as possible, such as onions and garlic? Like for some people, so like we'd say, like you're going to get that kind of prebiotic benefit whether you're eating it raw or not. So I'd say, like if you like them raw, eat them. Like some people might struggle to eat them raw, or if you prefer to kind of cook them, then that's fine too. It's more about how you prefer to eat them. You're going to get benefits from them by including them. So it's better to have them in some way rather than not have them. So whichever way you find it easier to have them, or that you can be more consistent with it. And keeping and for some people as well with a sensitive gut, if foods are very raw, it can be difficult for them to digest. So it can depend on your own gut as well. Like if someone has a sensitive gut, they might not get on too great with very raw things. But if their gut is kind of more able for it, then raw foods, of course, have their benefits as well. So whichever you prefer. But again, variety is key. But the onions and garlic are really good prebiotics, so they're definitely really good to include. So I had a direct message question there as well. So I don't know if you can see it. Someone said, is 0% fat Greek yogurt considered live? So some of them are, like, it won't be as standard. But if you just look on the label, it will generally say like live yogurt, or it might on the ingredients have the name of like a certain bacteria or something like that. So if it doesn't say live, then it probably isn't. And if there's no mentions of bacteria, but yeah, there's no reason why 0% fat wouldn't be live if they've added it in. So I just check to see if it is live, and then it will be. Yeah, so just check for live. I just had another one come in there. I don't know if you can see it. What are your opinions on vitamin supplements? So vitamin supplements, so the general thing is like if you're eating a very diverse diet, and you had no issue and no kind of medical conditions or anything like that, and you didn't have to restrict any particular foods or anything like that, and you're able to eat everything, then you probably aren't going to need a supplement. There will be, like, vitamin D is the only one that I would say that, generally the advice is everyone should take a vitamin D between kind of October and April, because the sun isn't strong enough to make vitamin D, so you should be taking it then. But besides vitamin D, unless you have been found to have a certain deficiency, then there's kind of no reason to take it. Anything to stay on stools differing every time you go to the bathroom, which is perfect stools in the morning, diarrhea at lunch, and then fine again in the evening. And I have a doctor booked. Well, that's great. So it's good you have the doctor booked and everything to have a look at that. Like it depends what's going on in the bowel. Like if someone's going, like in IBS, it can be very common to have a mixture. So there's 3 different types of or 4 different types of IBS actually. One is kind of diarrhea predominant, one is constipation predominant, and one is IBS-M, which is IBS mixed, where you have that change. So as well, like depending like what you're eating, if you're having a loose stool after lunch, it may not necessarily be as a result of what you just ate. We know it can take up to 48 hours for food to go from our mouth down the other end. So it could be something that someone ate yesterday or the day before. That's having that impact. And oftentimes when I work with clients, we'd have, food and symptom diaries. We can really look at trends and stuff like that. So yeah, it's good you're getting it checked out, but it can vary. People can have very different stools throughout the day. And there's another message there. Can IBS come about at any age? Yeah, it can. It can come at any age, really. It's more common in women kind of in their 20s and 30s, maybe. But it can develop. I've seen people of any age with IBS, or it could be like as IBS has become more talked about in recent years. It might be older people who kind of always had good symptoms when they were younger, but no one knew much about IBS then. They might get diagnosed later, but they've always had the IBS, if you get me. Do you get kefir seeds in a grocery store? I've not seen them. When I've gotten them online. You can order them online. They're quite cheap, maybe like €5 or something. So you can get them online, or like if you know anyone who has their own kefir, they do grow and expand quite quickly. And like I know when I did it, I had to throw some away because they just produce so much. So if you know anyone who is making kefir, they might donate some to you, and they grow anyway quite big. But I've not seen, they might have them in maybe like a health food shop, but I've not seen them in a regular grocery store. So or else getting them online is quite cost effective as well. Someone said, I heard the phrase "what happened in the bathroom today happened yesterday." Yeah, just as I said, that's very true. So it might not be something that you just ate. It's likely something that you ate earlier or the day before. So if you're working with someone, like looking at, a food diary can be really helpful to really look for trends. If you just happen to get a loose stool randomly one time, then, it's not really a concern. If it's all the time, then obviously, there could be an issue there. And you might look at your diet and other things to see what's going on. More so about not worrying about things all the time, not an exact medical and scientific fact. I'm not sure that question, but I think someone might have their microphone on. I can hear kind of like noise there. Oh yeah, following from the fridge. Yeah, that's perfect. But yeah, definitely it can be if you are struggling with gut symptoms, like obviously like when you eat something, people might say, oh, if I eat this food, I feel my tummy is upset straight away. But like as we said, it's going to take hours, like at least kind of minimum 4 hours for what you eat to get down to your large intestine where your gut bacteria are. So every time you eat, of course, what you ate earlier, what you ate yesterday is going to move further down your gut to where your bacteria are. So they might start fermenting them and maybe causing you symptoms, but it might not have been what you just ate. It's just the fact that you ate something, everything was pushed along your intestine, and now you're getting symptoms. But that food you just ate, it's all the way up here. It's not down in your bowel, so it's unlikely what you just ate. So just if you are noticing certain foods that you feel they might be affecting you, just a food and symptom diary can be useful, so you can actually look for trends and stuff rather than just kind of one-off things. So that's all the questions I can see so far.
Yeah, there's another question.
Yeah. Again, can sauerkraut in the grocery store? Yeah, I have seen it in some places. It definitely is getting more common. Definitely in places like the English market or like kind of specialist health food shops are more likely to have it. But I have seen it in different supermarkets. It's often kind of the like international, someone's saying they're Polish and Chinese. Yeah, so it's kind of like in the international food section, it definitely is more common because they tend to eat more of these fermented foods in other cultures quite regularly, whereas in Ireland, we didn't really eat these foods very much. So often, like shops that cater for other cultures and stuff like that might have them, or if you're in a large supermarket and they have like an area for kind of international foods and stuff like that, then they're probably more likely to have it than in your typical supermarket. So yeah, they're definitely getting easier to find though.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aoife. Is there any
No
any other
problem.
question? If you have any question, you can just turn on your microphone, your camera, or you can just pop it into the chat box. But yeah, thank you. That was super interesting, very practical advice as well.
Good, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And it was great questions. So thanks everyone for listening.